Thank you all for coming today. We wanted to have everyone here to let you know that we believe it's time for Democratic congressional candidates to come out of hiding and answer some important questions about the state of the Democratic voters so that voters this year can make an informed choice about who they're electing. Pennsylvania congressional elections, as you know, are going to be some of the most watched congressional elections and hotly contested congressional elections in the nation. Democrats hoping to ride a blue wave, what we think is a socialist red-edged blue wave, to take control of the U.S. House of Representatives, have made Pennsylvania ground zero. And we saw that fight play out earlier this year as a partisan Supreme Court took it upon itself to unconstitutionally change congressional lines. They did this through the courts, that which they could not do through the ballot box. And extremist views of the Democrats are already changing the outlook for the congressional map. As you know, here in Pennsylvania, 4 socialist candidates have won the nomination of the Democratic Party for state representative, and the lieutenant governor candidate of the Democratic Party, Fetterman, has also been known to espouse certain socialist views and to support and seek the support of Bernie Sanders. So we feel there are 3 very important questions that congressional Democrats here in Pennsylvania need to answer. These are questions that Democratic congressional candidates all across the country have been answering, but in Pennsylvania, congressional candidates have been largely silent on these issues. The first question, we have a postcard here that we're going to be putting out, is do you support Nancy Pelosi as leader of your party? The second question is, do you support the agenda of the socialists who have been winning elections, primaries here in Pennsylvania and across the country? And third, do you support Maxine Waters' call to publicly bully and harass Trump administration officials? Nancy Pelosi has been one of the most vocal critics of the Republican agenda and the obstructionist in chief for the Democratic Party. She has already stated that she will run for Speaker of the House, and she is on the record as saying that one of the first orders of business will be to repeal the Republican-led tax cuts that have on average put $2,700 into Pennsylvania families' pockets, and also help to incentivize job creators to get this economy growing. And we've seen what the effects of that tax cut have meant for the economy. Lowest unemployment in decades, the lowest African American unemployment ever recorded, lowest Hispanic unemployment, low female unemployment. Nancy Pelosi called those tax cuts crumbs. Over 20 Democrats running for Congress across the country have said they will not support her as leader. However, we don't know where our Democrat congressional candidates stand on this. And so it's especially important in terms of knowing what these candidates will do. We note that Connor Lamb said that he would vote against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker, but he has voted with her 90% of the time since he's been in Congress. What we seek to avoid is sending people to Congress who promise one thing and do another. We've seen that with Bob Casey, who ran as a moderate, said he was pro-life and pro-Second Amendment, but he's given up any pretense of that and is now so far to the left. He's given a big opening to Lou Barletta in his race for United States Senate. On our second question, we note that whether you support socialists or not, socialist candidates are gaining traction in Pennsylvania and at the national level. I mentioned the 4 state rep candidates here in Pennsylvania who are avowed or supporters of the socialist agenda. We saw just a couple weeks ago Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who won a primary in New York. And here in Pennsylvania, the co-chair of the Pittsburgh Democrats for Socialist Action said on primary night that we're turning Pennsylvania the right shade of red. That's the same shade of red that's in the USSR flag, same shade of red that's in the Chinese Communist flag, a flag under which tens of millions of people have perished in the last century, either by forced starvation, it's being sent to the gulags, or execution. We see what's happened in Venezuela with the socialist agenda. Americans have died trying to prevent the expansion of communism during the last century, but yet socialists are on the rise here within the Democrat Party. These candidates support very extreme policies like single-payer health care, free higher education for all, sanctuary cities, and abolishing ICE. These policies would result in a radical redistribution of wealth. It would make the country less safe. As socialism becomes to be mainstream within the Democratic Party, we feel it's our job in the Republican Party and people who support free markets and freedom and the principles upon which the country was founded to call out this far left agenda. And we think it's important that Democratic congressional candidates tell us where they stand with regard to this very dangerous movement. And finally, Maxine Waters' dangerous call to bully Trump administration officials has already had dangerous consequences. We've seen that when Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was going in the restaurant, he was harassed. We've seen Brian Fitzpatrick's office, Congressman Fitzpatrick's office in Bucks County was vandalized. This kind of rhetoric does nothing to add to a civil discussion to our country's most pressing issues. As a leader of the Republican Party, I've called on our state committee members, our county committee members and candidates to keep the conversation civil, to respect the other side, even when we vehemently disagree with one another. Even Chuck Schumer called Maxine Waters' comments un-American. So we need to know why Pennsylvania Democrats have remained largely silent on this issue. I'm joined today, so everybody knows, with our Vice Chair, Bernie Comfort, and here with me is the Dauphin County Chair and Assistant Treasurer of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, Dave Flight. Dave, did you want to add anything?
Sure. As Val mentioned, we're going to be using these postcards. We're going to be taking them as the county chair here in Dauphin. We're going to be putting these on the street every day, putting these on the street, forcing these candidates to answer to the voters and tell them where do they stand on these issues, where do they stand on the radical far left agenda of the Democratic Socialist Party. You know, here in Dauphin County, we saw Scott Perry's opponent last year doing outlandish things in web videos, things that you would never think would be done in central Pennsylvania, burning guns on a web ad. I mean, that's not central Pennsylvania values. I mean, they need to answer to the voters on where they stand on these critical issues, and so that we can make sure that the voters are informed and make sure that they do not, as Val said earlier, sell one thing and then do another.
Bernie, do you want to add anything?
I think that this will help us tell voters in Pennsylvania that there's a clear choice between the two parties, especially the way the Democratic Party is leaning to become the Socialist Party. So I think it's time for voters to have their congressional candidates answer these important questions so that we know where they stand and we can make better choices as educated voters.
Thank you. Thanks, Bernie. Okay. So with that, again, it's time for the Democrats to come out of hiding and answer these three questions. We're going to have this out to all the county chairs, all our candidates, and we're going to ask them on the campaign trail where they stand, because we think Pennsylvania voters deserve to know. So with that, thank you for being here. If there are any questions, we have time for a couple questions.
Chairman Giorgio, just sort of, I guess, in the spirit of, holding parties accountable for the larger forces at work. A lot of hay has been made recently about the Trump administration's handling of immigration at the southern border. First off, do you guys support the family separation policy that's now been ended? And even, after that, how do you feel the administration's done with trying to unite families? Many still haven't been reunited. How's that whole situation?
Yeah, the situation at the border is chaotic and underscores the need for comprehensive immigration reform. We support the president and his executive order to make sure families are not being separated. We don't think families should be separated. However, we do support the president and the administration on having a tough stance on illegal immigration. We think a country is not a country without borders. Those borders need to be enforced. We want immigration. As the grandson of an immigrant, someone who's married to an immigrant, I know how important immigration is to our society. But we do support the administration here in the Republican Party in its efforts to curb and eliminate, if we can, illegal immigration.
I just want to clarify something too. You had sort of, I guess, in the same breath mentioned socialism, the sort that was used in other countries in South America, and also communism. Obviously, I think, as you know, those two aren't the same. Are you, saying they're similar, or can you clarify your comments
Well,
there?
socialism and communism have very similar. It's all about state control of the means of distribution and a business. Typically, it tends toward totalitarianism, as we saw in Venezuela. Socialism tends toward totalitarianism and the loss of freedoms. we think can very easily lead into communism and the kind of abuses we saw under communism.
Okay.
If you get answers to your questions from candidates, are you gonna post them somewhere? Are you gonna create
Yeah,
a space?
we're gonna
for-
post them, we're gonna have social media, we're gonna do additional press conferences, and we're gonna have our county committee and state committee members ask them on the campaign trail where they stand on these issues. We do feel it's an important enough issue to ask you to come here today. You know, someone who grew up respecting the principles upon which the country was founded, understanding how important free enterprise is, seeing that free enterprise and capitalism have lifted over $800 million out of 800 million people out of extreme poverty over the last 30 years in places like Africa and Asia. We understand has increased standards of living, increased how long we live. We think free markets are very important and something to be fought for. And we're shocked, the three of us and our candidates, that the Democrat Party is sort of moving more and more toward the left and toward redistribution of wealth policies and policies to take over industries and the means of production and distribution of products and industry.
Your own party has moved, I think this is sort of not contested, moved farther to the right in the last maybe 10 years. Do you see this, movement on the Democratic side as being an answer to that?
I don't necessarily agree. I think sometimes in rhetoric we've moved to the right, but we still stand for what Ronald Reagan stood for, which was free markets, which is respect for life at every stage of a life from the womb to throughout your life. We respect the Second Amendment. I don't know that we've moved further to the right. I think to the extent that the rhetoric's been increased, it's because we've seen a Democratic Party that has increasingly waged a culture war, has told people who believe in the principles upon which the country was founded that somehow you're a bigot. You're a bigot because, for instance, you don't want your daughter to walk into a bathroom with a man. That makes you a bigot. You're a bigot if you have certain deeply held religious views that makes you somehow intolerant. And I think what you've seen is that as the rhetoric has been ramping up, it seems like the Republican Party, to some people on the left, is moving to the right, but we still stand for what's been in our platform since the 80s, as far as I can tell. What I don't like to see on either side, and we've seen it on both sides, is a rhetoric of divisiveness and even hatred. And I think on both sides of the aisle, we need to find a way to come together and talk to each other. Because I still think we agree on more than we disagree. But if we can't talk to each other out of a position of compassion and respect for one another, you're going to see the rhetoric continue to go to the right. So I think it's more a matter of tone than it is policy, to answer your question.
A lot of Democrats make the distinction, maybe farther left Democrats make the distinction of being a democratic socialist, not just, straight up socialist, as you said. Do you think that's a legitimate distinction? How do you parse that?
I don't know. I reject and abhor socialism in any of its, different forms. So
You don't think that's a distinction?
I don't know. Then you'd have to ask them. I think when you talk about redistribution of wealth, when you talk about government taking over control of industries, whether by regulation or outright doing it, whether you talk about taking away certain rights and making the state bigger at the expense of the individual, I think it's a dangerous road to go down, whether you call it democratic socialism or outright socialism. But I don't know the difference. Okay. Thank you all for being here.